Can't you do anything right?
Can you not do anything right? His voice cut through the room. 400 guests, and every one of them turned to watch him say it. She stayed on her knees, wiping his wine off the marble, and said nothing. Because if he saw her face, 3 years of surviving would be over in a heartbeat. Here's what he didn't know. The woman he'd just called nothing, she's the woman he tore this city apart to find. For 3 years, Seo Do-yoon hunted the stranger who saved his life. He spent a fortune. He threatened ghosts. He chased every dead end. And she'd been right in front of him the whole time. In 10 minutes, he was going to marry someone else. You read that right. This is Cinderella, Seoul, Mafia edition, and the woman on that floor is not who any of them think she is. By the end of this, the man at that altar is going to wish he'd looked twice. If your chest is already tight, subscribe and hit the bell right now. We write stories like this every week, and you do not want to miss what she does next. And tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Now let's go back. Back to how a woman who once held this man's life in her hands ended up on her knees, cleaning his floor, while he married the woman who stole her name. 3 years earlier, Nia Cole had never heard the name Seo. She was a medical student, 3rd year, top of her class, the kind professors argue over, steady hands, a stubborn heart, a phone that had died 4 blocks back. It was late. It was cold, the wet soul cold that shows up right before spring gives up pretending. She was walking home the long way, through an alley she should never have taken, on the night that would decide the rest of her life. A man fell against the wall in front of her. He didn't stumble. He fell the way a building falls, all at once, from the inside. The streetlight caught the blood. 2 holes in him, one high in the shoulder, one lower and worse. More blood than a body can lose and still stand. He slid down the brick, leaving a dark smear. His mouth was filling. His eyes were already going somewhere far away. Most people would have run. You know it. I know it. And no one would have blamed them. Nia knelt. She didn't think about who he was, or who did this, or whether they were still close enough to do it to her. She thought about pressure, airway, the angle of the wound. She pulled the scarf from her own neck, folded it into a pad, and drove the heel of her hand into the worst of it. Hard, the way her father taught her in a clinic that smelled of antiseptic and instant coffee. Before he died, she talked to him the whole time. Not comfort, command. Stay with me, eyes open. You do not get to close them. Breathe when I tell you to breathe. His eyes kept trying to close. No, she said, not tonight. You don't get to leave tonight. And for reasons he'd spent 3 years failing to explain, he listened. He held that voice like a rope thrown into water. She never asked his name. She never went through his pockets. She never once asked what he'd done to earn 2 bullets in a back alley. And when black cars screamed around the corner and hard men poured out with guns already up, she still didn't run. She kept her hands where they were. He needs a surgeon in 20 minutes or he dies. Take him, or let me keep working. Decide now. They took him. One of them reached for her too. A girl who'd seen the boss bleed as a loose end. But the boss, half conscious, gripped the man's wrist with the last of his strength and said one word. No. Then they were gone. And Nia Cole stood alone in an alley with a stranger's blood drying on her hands, not knowing she'd just rewritten her entire life. Do-yoon didn't forget her. That's the thing about men like him. They're made of memory and debt, and she'd just handed him both. He found her, not the CO way. No fear, no car outside her building at 3 a.m. He found her carefully, quietly, like a man who'd found the one clean thing in a filthy world and was terrified of ruining it. No threats. Instead, of all things, a new scarf, because he'd kept hers, ruined with his blood, and a note in careful handwriting. I am the man who did not get to leave. Thank you for the order. No name. She laughed out loud, alone in her tiny apartment. She should have been afraid. She wasn't. That was the first sign she was already in trouble. For a few impossible months, the heir to Seoul's most feared syndicate, and the medical student who saved him, fell into something neither had permission to want. He wouldn't tell her what he did. She wasn't stupid. She saw the men trailing them at a distance. She saw waiters go pale when he walked in. She saw locked doors that were simply open. She put it together. One night she said it out loud, exactly what he was, and waited for him to lie. He didn't lie. That's the moment she loved him. Not for what he was, because he wouldn't insult her by pretending to be something else. I can walk away, she told him. I should. You know I should. I know, he said. Give me one reason not to. And this man, who had ordered terrible things done to terrible people, who had a body count and a bounty, and a face on watch lists in 3 countries, couldn't give her one. He just looked at her like she was the last warm window on a freezing street. So she stayed. God help her, she stayed. And for a little while, in a city that ate soft things for breakfast, 2 people with no business being gentle were gentle with each other. His father was dying by then. Seo Taegon was the old boss, the real one, the one whose name still made grown men lower their voices. The cancer was doing what 40 years of enemies never could. Weeks left, maybe, and when he heard his son, his cold, closed-off son, had started smiling again, started showing up to Sunday dinner with light in his face, he demanded to know why. When he learned it was a girl, and that the girl had kept his son breathing on a pavement, he demanded to meet her. Naya didn't want to go. Everything in her said don't walk into that house. She went anyway, because Do-yoon asked, and because she'd already decided she was the kind of woman who runs toward the bleeding thing. The old man was propped up in a bed that cost more than her tuition. Gray. Shrunken. His eyes were still the sharpest thing in the room. He looked at her a long time. Then he asked 3 questions, none of them the ones she expected. Not what she wanted from his son, not what her family had. He asked what her father had been. He asked if she was afraid of him. And last, he asked if she'd known who his son was when she knelt in that alley. When she said, "No, sir," and I would have done it anyway. The old man closed his eyes like a man who'd finally heard the right answer to a question he'd carried his whole life. Then he did the thing the family would never forgive. He took his late wife's ring off his own hand. The ring, the Seo matriarch's ring, the one that crowned every real wife the family ever had, pressed it into Naya's palm, and closed her fingers around it. With his brother in the room, his mother in the room, and 2 of his oldest captains as witnesses, Seo Taegon swore a blood oath. "This girl," he said, his voice finding its old iron one last time, "is the wife my son will take. She is Seo now. She is family. She is protected. She is chosen. Whatever comes, and it's always coming, she belongs to us. And we do not lose what belongs to us. Family. Protected. Chosen." He was wrong about the last one. He died wrong. Because at that exact moment, standing in the corner with a soft, terrible smile on his face, was a man who had already decided Naya Cole would be the very first thing this family lost. Remember the smile. We're coming back to it. It started small. It always does. That's how they get away with it. First, the wedding was postponed, just until Taegon passes, out of respect. Of course, they said, it would be obscene to celebrate while the patriarch is dying. And Naya understood, because she was decent, and decent people are the easiest people in the world to delay. So she waited. Then Taegon died, and the same night, before the body was cold, Naya's scholarship was quietly revoked. Not failed, not reviewed. Revoked, by a private donor whose name the university couldn't, or wouldn't give her. She told herself it was a coincidence. Grief makes you generous with coincidences. Then her father's old clinic, the shuttered little clinic in her old neighborhood, the last physical thing she had of Dr. Cole, the place she still walked past to feel close to him, was bought by a shell company, with no face and no phone number. Gutted and closed within a week. And she started to feel the draft. You know the one. The cold that means a window is open somewhere you didn't open. Then Do-yoon stopped answering. Her messages stopped reaching him. His stopped reaching her. She didn't understand yet. She was too young, too clean to understand. That a man can be walled off from the person he loves by people who smile at him across the dinner table every night. She thought he'd changed his mind. She thought grief had shown him the truth. A boss can't love a nobody. So she got angry. Then she got proud. And she stopped reaching too. And then, on an ordinary Tuesday, there was a fire. It took the apartment where Naya lived with the aunt who'd raised her after Dr. Cole passed. The aunt who braided her hair for exams, who kept every report card, who cried over the medical school acceptance letter. The fire took the photographs, the documents, the birth certificate, the ID, the diplomas, every single piece of paper that proved Naya Cole was a real person, born and raised and loved in this city. And it took the aunt. She didn't make it out. When the reports were filed and the ashes were cold, 2 names were listed among the dead. One was the aunt's, the other was Naya's, because Naya was supposed to be home that night. She was always home on Tuesdays, but she'd gone to fight the university one last time about the scholarship, missed the last train, and walked. So she came around the corner of her own street at 2 in the morning to find fire trucks, a crowd, and the building where her whole life lived turning black against the sky. She stood across the street in a borrowed coat and watched the roof come down, and in about 10 seconds, on that curb, she understood 3 things at once, each one worse than the last. 1. This was not an accident. 2. Someone powerful enough to erase a person wanted her erased. 3. The one that changed everything. If she was already dead on paper, the safest thing she could possibly do was stay that way. A dead woman can't be killed twice. A dead woman isn't worth another fire. A dead woman gets to keep breathing, as long as she's willing to stop being a person to do it. She didn't know who'd done it. She swears she didn't, not then. She'd spend 3 years finding out. But on that curb she made the coldest decision of her life. She didn't go to the police. She didn't go to the COs. She didn't scream her own name into the crowd to prove she was alive. She turned around. She walked into the dark. And Nia Cole died on a Tuesday, so the woman inside her could live. Comment the word alive if you already know she made the right call, because a lot of people would have run to the police. Hold on to that thought. We're going to test it. So Nia Cole disappeared. In her place, a cleaner, with no last name. She took the jobs that make a person invisible, night shifts, service entrances, uniforms that turn a human being into furniture, and she learned something in those first brutal months that she'd carry forever. The city looks straight through a woman on her knees with a rag in her hand. Rich men discuss crimes over her head. Powerful women undress in front of her like she's a coat rack. Nobody remembers the face of the person who cleans up after them. And for the first time in her life, Nia was grateful to be unseen. Unseen meant unfound. Unfound meant alive. But she kept 2 things. Write them down. Both of them matter. The first was the ring, Taegon's ring, the CO matriarch's ring, the one object on Earth that could prove she'd been promised anything, that she'd ever been chosen by anyone. She sewed it into the lining of her coat and never took it out. Not once. Not in the winters her fingers cracked from the cold. Not in the months when selling it meant a warm room, a full stomach, a bed instead of a floor. She went hungry with a fortune sewn over her heart, because the ring wasn't money to her. It was the last proof that she'd once been loved out loud, by a dying man, in a room full of witnesses. The second thing was her hands. The steady hands, the trained hands, the hands that had been 3 years, from a white coat with her name on it. In the small hours, in boiler rooms and storage closets, she read medical textbooks pulled from donation bins and recycling piles. She quizzed herself on drug interactions while she mopped. And she couldn't turn it off, even when she wanted to. She could look at a stranger across a subway car and know, before they did, that something was wrong with their heart, their liver, their blood. A cleaner with a surgeon's hands and a dead woman's name. Remember that. It's going to matter more than anyone in that ballroom could ever imagine. Which brings us back to the wedding. The cleaning company Nia worked for had landed the biggest contract of the Seoul social season. The wedding of Seo Do-yoon, the new, undisputed head of the Seo syndicate, to Han Chae-rin, the beautiful daughter of an allied family. Less a wedding than a merger with flowers. 2 dynasties, 1 bloodline, a peace treaty in a white dress. Nia didn't know whose wedding it was when she took the shift. She took it for the overtime. She found out at dawn, when she walked into the ballroom to set up, looked up, and saw his face on a banner 2 stories tall. And this is where it hits, because it hit her, standing there with a bucket at 5 in the morning. The man she'd saved, the man she'd loved, the man the whole world, including him, believed she'd never reach again. Alive, powerful, unmarked by the last 3 years, and marrying someone else before sundown. She should have walked out. She knows that. She stood at the service door with her heart trying to climb out of her body, and she almost did. Instead, she picked up her cloth and stayed, and told herself a small, forgivable lie. She just wanted to see him one more time, from across a room where he'd never think to look. One look, a goodbye he'd never know he was part of. Then she'd vanish for good. She didn't plan to be seen. She sure didn't plan for him to knock a glass of red wine across the head table with his sleeve, or for a panicking supervisor to grab her arm and shove her toward the spreading stain in front of 400 guests, or to end up, for the first time in 3 years, on her knees at the feet of the only man who'd ever chosen her. While he looked down at her, felt nothing, and didn't know her at all. Can you not do anything right? And we're back where we began. Except now you know exactly whose heart he was standing on when he said it. But the night wasn't done with either of them, not even close. An hour before the ceremony, a man in a waiter's jacket who was not a waiter started moving toward the head table. something metal held flat under his tray. Do-yoon's men were slow that night. Too many guests, too much noise, too much wine. A room full of allies who were supposed to be safe. The head of security was arguing with a florist. Two of the boss's closest guards were watching the doors, not the floor. And the only person in that entire ballroom who saw the false waiter for what he was, who read the line of his shoulders, and the wrongness in his walk the exact way she'd once read a wound in an alley, was a cleaner nobody was watching. Naya didn't shout. Shouting starts a panic, and panic gets the target killed. She moved. She crossed 15 feet of marble in the time it took to gasp. She got there half a second before the blade, and did the only thing there was time to do. She put her own body between the knife and the boss. The blade meant for Seo Do-yoon's throat opened her left forearm instead. A long, hot line she barely felt. Then, before the man could pull back for another strike, she had his wrist. She caught it, and turned it the way she'd learned to turn a stubborn joint in an anatomy lab, past where it wants to go. The knife hit the floor. The man went down screaming, and she handled it with the calm, exact competence of someone who has kept a stranger alive with her bare hands before. The guards reached him 3 seconds later. 3 seconds. He'd have been dead in 3 seconds. He knew it. Everyone in that corner knew it. And for 1 second, on the floor, her blood on his sleeve, and a stranger's knife spinning to a stop beside them, Seo Do-yoon looked at the woman he'd humiliated an hour earlier, and couldn't understand why his chest had gone tight. Couldn't understand why her voice, calm, not even glancing at her own arm, "You're fine." It missed the artery. "Stay still." Landed somewhere deep he'd walled off years ago. "Do I know you?" he said. And Naya Cole, bleeding on the marble, 3 years dead, one single word from ending all of it, from having everything she ever wanted, finally look her in the face and see her, looked him dead in the eyes, and said, "No, sir, you don't." Why would she lie? Why, with the man she loved finally looking at her, finally asking, would she pick up the truth and throw it away with both hands? Here's what Naya didn't know as they walked her to a back room, and a doctor stitched her arm. For 3 years, Seo Do-yoon had been searching for the woman from the alley. He never stopped. Not for a day. He spent money that could have bought a small country. He put the word out through every contact the Seo name could reach, in the country and out of it. He was a man in love with a ghost, and everyone around him knew it. A man in love with a ghost is very, very hard to marry off. So the families solved it the way powerful families solve every inconvenient thing. They built a lie. They fed him documents. A witness who could be paid. A hospital record that could be forged. A story, delivered carefully, at the right vulnerable moment, in the fog of his grief, that it was Han Chae-rin who found him bleeding that night. Chae-rin who knelt in the alley. Chae-rin who saved his life. And, being so modest, so well-bred, never wanted to make a fuss about it. Wasn't it fate? Wasn't it beautiful? The woman he'd been hunting had been at the next dinner table the whole time. The woman he was about to marry had stolen the one memory that belonged to Naya, put it on like a borrowed dress, and worn it to her own wedding. Do-yoon never fully believed it. Somewhere under the grief, he knew the story didn't fit. The hands were wrong. The voice was wrong. The way Chae-rin flinched at blood was wrong. But grief makes you take the shape of the story you're handed, because the alternative is admitting the real one is gone forever. So he let himself be talked into it. He let himself be walked to the edge of a wedding built entirely on another woman's courage, and this is where it turns. Because the real woman, the one whose courage they'd stolen and whose life they'd burned, was, at that exact moment, 30 feet away in a back room, bleeding again, telling him, "No, you don't know me, sir." The lie was about to marry him. The truth was mopping his floor. When Naya finally learned who'd burned her life to the ground, it wasn't in a dramatic confrontation. It was by accident, the way the worst truths always arrive. She was in the servants' corridor behind the ballroom, arm freshly bandaged, head down, when she heard two voices through a half-open door she was never, ever meant to hear. The first belonged to Han Chae-rin's father, the bride's father, head of the allied family. The second belonged to Seo Kang-min, Do-yoon's uncle, his father's brother, the man who'd stood in that room 3 years ago when the old boss swore Naya into the family, the man who'd smiled that soft, terrible smile at the blood oath, and then spent every resource he had, quietly, patiently, to undo it. "The girl from the alley is dead," Kang-min said, in the bored voice of a man discussing the weather. "I made sure 3 years ago. The scholarship, the clinic, the fire, all mine. Nothing left. No paper, no proof, Nobody worth finding. A nobody with no family. Erasing her was easier than firing a maid. Your daughter marries my nephew tonight. Our families become one. And I run everything through the boy. Because the boy trusts blood, and I am blood. He never has to know his sentimental father chose a gutter girl over his own family. He never has to know anything at all. And Naya, flat against the cold wall, hand pressed over her own mouth, finally understood everything. The scholarship, the clinic, the messages that stopped, the fire that killed her aunt and buried her name. None of it was fate. None of it was Do-yoon losing interest. None of it was bad luck. It was him. This one man. Kang Min had murdered her family, burned her life, and erased her from the earth. Not out of hatred, not even anything personal, but because a dying old man put a ring in the wrong hand and swore an oath that left Kang Min one wedding away from losing the entire empire. He killed her aunt to break a blood oath. He killed her aunt to steal a syndicate. And now the question we withheld answers itself. And it's so much worse than you thought. Why won't she just tell Do-yoon who she is? He's right there. He's asking. One word and the whole lie collapses. Because the moment Kang Min learns Naya Cole is alive, the moment there's a living witness who can put his voice to a murder and a name to a fire, he finishes what he started 3 years ago. And he won't stop at her. He kills the nephew standing between him and everything. He kills Do-yoon tonight, cleanly, and pins it on the grieving ghost of the girl from the alley, back for revenge. A dead woman is the perfect murderer. She can't testify. She can't defend herself. She's already a corpse. You can hang anything you like on a corpse. So understand this, because it's the beating heart of the whole story. Naya staying dead was never cowardice. It was never fear. Staying dead, disappearing, going hungry, cleaning floors, letting the man she loved marry someone else, was the only thing keeping Do-yoon alive. Every single day she stayed invisible. She was saving his life again. She saved him once in an alley in 20 minutes. She'd been saving him for 3 years, 24 hours at a time, by refusing to exist. And now the choice. Reveal herself and risk his life. Or stay silent, stay dead, and watch the man she loved marry into the family that helped bury her, and hand his whole empire to the man who ordered the fire. Tell me in the comments, what would you do? Burn it all down for love, or stay dead to keep him breathing? There's no clean answer. That's the point. Drop your theory for what she does next, and hit subscribe, because you are not going to believe how she plays this. Kang Min found her first. Of course he did. Men like him smell a loose thread across a crowded room. He didn't recognize her face. 3 years of hunger and hiding had changed it, sharpened it, aged it past the soft student she'd been. But he recognized something worse. He recognized the way she looked at him. Everyone else in that building looked at Seo Kang Min with fear, or greed, or deference. This cleaner looked at him like she knew him, like she had a receipt, and that made him careful. A careful Kang Min is a dangerous Kang Min. He didn't have her killed on the spot. Too messy, too many witnesses, too close to the wedding he'd spent 3 years engineering. Instead, he sent a man with an envelope. Inside, enough money to disappear somewhere warm forever. Enough to never clean another floor. Enough to buy back the exact life the fire had taken. And a folded note, 2 words in an elegant hand, "Stay gone." Naya looked at that envelope for a long time. Longer than she's proud of. She thought about warmth. She'd been cold for 3 years, and you know what 3 years of cold does to a person. She thought about a bed, about being full, about never being invisible again because she chose it, instead of being forced into it. She thought about how tired she was, in her bones, in her blood. And then she thought about her father, who ran a free clinic in a poor neighborhood, and died with empty pockets and a full name. She thought about her aunt, who braided her hair and burned to death for the crime of loving her. She thought about a dying old man who pressed a ring into her palm and swore, in front of God and witnesses, that she was chosen, she was family, she was his, and about how she'd spent 3 years letting them turn that oath into a lie. And she made a different choice. Naya walked into the bridal suite, into the room where Han Chae-rin sat in her wedding dress, 3 assistants fussing over the hem, where the Han patriarch accepted congratulations, where Kang Min waited, glass in hand, to toast the family he'd built on ashes. And, this is the one that mattered, where Halmyeoni Seo sat in the corner, the old boss's mother, Do-yoon's grandmother, the woman who'd watched her dying son give away her own wedding ring, and never stopped grieving the promise the family broke. The room went quiet at the cleaner in the doorway. A supervisor started to apologize, to shoo her out. Naya held up the envelope, and in front of all of them she tore it in half. Then in half again. The money drifted to the marble like confetti, like the world's most expensive snow, and nobody in that room breathed. I used to think I survived that fire by luck, she said, calm as still water. For 3 years I thought I got out because I missed a train. I didn't. I survived, so I could stand in this exact room, on this exact night, when you finally ran out of people to bury. Kang Min's glass stopped halfway to his mouth. Then Naya reached into the lining of her coat, the coat she'd worn through 3 winters, the coat with a fortune sewn over her heart, and pulled out the ring. Taegon's ring. The CO matriarch's ring. She set it down on the vanity, gently, right where the old woman in the corner could see it. Halmione Seo went white, because she knew that ring. She'd worn it an ount. She'd watched her son take it off his own hand and give it away with his last strength. And she'd spent 3 years being told the girl he gave it to was dead and gone and never real. My name is Naya Cole, Naya said into the silence. Your older son chose me. She turned to Kang Min. And your son tried to erase me. He revoked my scholarship. He closed my father's clinic. He set the fire that killed my aunt and put my name on a list of the dead. Ask him. Ask him right now, with all of you watching his face, and watch what it does. And everyone in that room turned and looked at CO Kang Min, and for the first time in 3 years, the smile was gone. They took it to the rooftop, away from 400 guests, away from the family, away from the ears that would carry it. Just CO Do-yoon, and the woman who'd lied to him with her own name. He held the ring and couldn't stop looking at it. His father's oath, made whole, his own memory, snapping into place after 3 years of static. The alley, the scarf, the blood filling his mouth and a voice above him that wouldn't let go. Not tonight. You don't get to leave tonight. And an hour ago on the marble floor of his own wedding. You're fine. It missed the artery. Stay still. The same voice. The same steady, fearless hands. The same woman. Alive. Cleaning his floor while he called her nothing. It was you, he said. Not a question. In the alley. It was you. And tonight, the knife. That was you too. It was always you. His voice was doing something it hadn't done in years. I looked for you for 3 years. Everywhere. I never stopped. They told me you were dead. They told me, and he stopped. Because the whole shape of the lie was rising in front of him now, and it was enormous. I know, Naya said. I know you looked. I saw the men, early on, before I got good at hiding. I know. Then why? His voice broke. This man, who ran the most feared name in the city, who didn't flinch at blood or guns or the worst things people do to each other, broke like a boy on that rooftop. Why did you let me believe you were dead? Do you have any idea what it did to me? Why? And Naya Cole, who'd cried alone for 3 years with the tap running, so no one next door would hear, who'd been unseen so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to be looked at by someone who loved her, finally stopped holding it in. Because staying dead was the only way to keep you alive, she said, and then the tears came. The kind that comes when the body has held on too long and finally understands it's safe to let go. Your uncle set that fire, Do-yoon, to break your father's oath, to take everything from you through a marriage. The second he knows I'm alive, he kills you and blames the ghost. So I stayed gone. I saved you once in that alley, in 20 minutes. And I've spent 3 years saving you every single day since. By disappearing. By being no one. Do you understand what I'm telling you? I never left you. Not for 1 day. I just loved you from somewhere you couldn't see. He crossed that rooftop in 3 steps, pulled her in, and held her the way you hold someone when the only thing left to offer is your arms, and the words, I'm here, I'm not going anywhere. And under the whole cold, glittering skyline of Seoul, the woman who'd been invisible for 3 years was, at last, seen. There was no wedding that night. Seo Do-yoon walked back down into that ballroom, his father's ring in his pocket, his uncle's confession already in his hand. Because remember the surgeon's memory, the mind that couldn't turn itself off? Naya had stood in that corridor and recorded every word. Kang Min saying the fire was his. Kang Min saying the girl was dead and he'd made sure of it. Kang Min saying the boy never had to know anything at all. Do-yoon played it in the middle of the ballroom, over the sound system built to carry a cruel man's voice to the back wall. Tonight it carried his uncle's voice instead, confessing to murder, to 400 of the most powerful people in the city. Kang Min, who'd spent 3 years certain he'd buried the only witness, watched the entire room turn against him, the way a crowd turns toward the thing it's finally decided is true. His allies stepped back. His own men looked at their feet, and in their world there's no court and no appeal. There's only the moment the room decides you're finished. The room decided. The Han family's beautiful lie collapsed in a single night, and Han Chae-rin, who'd worn another woman's courage like jewelry, who'd let herself be called a hero for a rescue she never performed, walked out through the service entrance, for the first and last time in her privileged life, while the woman she'd stolen from stood in the center of the ballroom, in a gray uniform, finally, undeniably real. In the 2 years that followed, Nia Cole finished what the fire interrupted. She went back. She reclaimed her name, legally, publicly, a dead woman signing herself back into existence, one office at a time. She re-enrolled. She did the residency, and she earned the white coat with her real name stitched over the heart. Dr. Nia Cole, the coat her father died believing she'd one day wear. She did it on her own terms, with her own hands, the way you build a life after you've already survived losing everything and found out you're still standing. And Do-yoon spent those 2 years doing something harder than revenge. He spent them dismantling the empire his uncle killed for, pulling it apart piece by piece, walking it away from the blood it was built on, turning the most feared name in Seoul into something quieter, cleaner, something a woman could stand beside without fearing what she was standing next to. He wasn't a perfect man. He didn't become one. But he became a man who chose, every single day, to be worth what she'd paid to keep him alive. He learned to cook for her, badly. He set off the smoke alarm so many times she made him a laminated card of instructions. He learned that being chosen and being safe could, for the first time in either of their lives, be the same thing. And on an ordinary evening, not a ballroom, not 400 guests, just an apartment with both their names on the lease and something burning gently on the stove, he got down on one knee and offered her the ring she'd carried through fire, not to bind her to a family this time, not as an oath, not as protection, not as a merger, just because she was already home, and he wanted to ask her out loud, in a room where she could finally be seen saying yes. So tell us, be honest, was Nia right to stay dead all those years to protect the man she loved? Or should she have told him the truth, the very first moment she saw his face across that ballroom? And do you want part 2? Because Kang Min may be finished, but the Han family is not. And someone in that room, the night everything fell apart, made a phone call. We saw them do it. A quiet call, in a corner, while the empire burned. Tell us who you think it was, because we're thinking of someone specific, and we want to see if you're thinking the same thing. Smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell if you haven't yet, because you do not want to miss part 2. New story exactly like this one, every single week. See you in part 2.